Welcome to the 700 Club, and thanks for joining us. An Islamic terrorist group backed by Iran has fired a missile at the United Arab Emirates. The attack came during a visit by Israel's president over the weekend.
The rebels are vowing to continue attacking the UAE as long as it's friendly with Israel. Chris Mitchell has the latest on the UAE's response.
The UAE says it destroyed a ballistic missile site in Yemen after shooting down a missile fired at their country by an Iranian-backed rebel group. The attack came during the historic visit of Israeli President Isaac Herzog to the UAE capital Abu Dhabi after the two nations signed an historic peace agreement in 2020.
We are two successful nations who basically started with very little in our hands, developed our lands into a successful paradise, and this sends a message to the entire region that there is an alternative for peace and living together, and that the sons and daughters of Abraham can reside and dwell together in peaceful coexistence.
Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed thanked Herzog for Israel's support after the two recent missile attacks by the Houthi rebels.
It's a stance that demonstrates our common view of the threats to regional stability and peace, particularly those posed by militias and terrorist forces, as well as our shared understanding of the importance of taking a firm stance against them.
Dr. Najat Al-Sayed of the American University in Dubai said the timing of the visit demonstrates that the new relationships between Israel and its Arab neighbors will stand up to threats by Iran's proxies in the region.
We're going to support the warm peace, which is the main kind of peace that kills the hostile and extremist ideologies.
Israeli Reserve Brigadier General Yossi Kupferwasser said it also comes in the context of the U.S. pulling back in the region and developments with Iran.
Coming to the UAE in a time like that, when the fate of the Iranian nuclear project is going to be determined, is very important for Israel, and to show that we are there together with the United Arab Emirates facing this radical threat. It's very important strategically.
The U.S. State Department condemned the attack. Spokesman Ned Price tweeting, while Israel's president is visiting the UAE to build bridges and promote stability across the region, the Houthis continue to launch attacks that threaten civilians. Meanwhile, the rebels threaten more attacks.
The Yemenite armed forces confirmed that the UAE enemy state will remain unsafe as long as the tools of the Israeli enemy remain in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, launching aggression against our dear country.
Despite the attack, President Herzog continued his trip as planned. Both Israel and the UAE pledge they won't let Iran stand in their way from creating a new Middle East. To maintain the strong and growing alliance in the region, it will need the help of the U.S. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, peace is breaking out in the Middle East. It's all because of the Abraham Accords. It's all because of a bold initiative to say, let's bring peace. Let's bring peace to Israel. Let's bring peace to the Middle East. And certain ideologies that are just bent on destruction of Israel don't like that at all. What I don't understand is how can you possibly negotiate with Iran? How can you possibly say they'll hold to any agreement, that they aren't trying to develop a nuclear weapon? Now more than ever, we need to keep the pressure on to say, no, if you're going to continue with this kind of ideology of hate, that you are going to be isolated from the international community. We're going to shut off your sources of funds. We're going to boycott you. We're going to impose severe sanctions on you until you change. Without that, I just don't see that there's any way to have peace or to go into any kind of negotiations with them. Well, in other news, the mother of all sanctions, that's just one point of pressure the United States is threatening to use if Russia invades Ukraine. John Jessup has more from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. The United Nations Security Council is set to press Russia over its military buildup on Ukraine's borders today. U.S. officials say they're giving Russia an opportunity to explain its actions and find a way to avoid war.
We're prepared to address our concerns, Ukrainian concerns and Russian concerns at the diplomatic table, but it cannot be done on the battlefield.
The Russians are dismissing the UN meeting as a publicity stunt, and they claim they're pulling back some of their 100,000-plus troops on Ukraine's border. NATO officials say the alliance will not send in troops to Ukraine. However, Britain is considering a major deployment to the region. Meanwhile, U.S. lawmakers are nearing completion on a bill they call the mother of all sanctions on Russia's economy if it does indeed invade. Well, North Korea launched its most powerful ballistic missile in 5 years. These photos released by the regime show the Hwasong-12 missile in flight Sunday. The intermediate-range weapon is nuclear capable and has the ability to reach the U.S. territory of Guam. It is Pyongyang's 7th missile test this month. The White House plans a response to the test to reassure regional allies. Well, here at home, the first of President Biden's potential nominees for the Supreme Court is now publicly known. The White House confirming U.S. District Judge J. Michelle Childs of South Carolina is on the list to replace retiring Justice Stephen Breyer. Childs is backed by South Carolina Congressman James Clyburn, who is also the House Majority Whip. Biden is said to be considering multiple candidates to the court while standing by his campaign pledge to nominate an African-American woman. That stand has prompted pushback from some Republicans. Maine Senator Susan Collins saying it was, quote, clumsy and politicized the process. And Mississippi Senator Roger Wicker said whoever the president picks will be a, quote, beneficiary of affirmative action. Speaking Sunday, South Carolina Republican Lindsey Graham disagreed.
I believe there are plenty of qualified African-American women, conservative and liberal, that could go onto the court. So I don't see Michelle Childs as an act of affirmative action. I do see putting a black woman on the court, making the court more like America.
An ABC News Ipsos poll out Sunday shows 76% of Americans believe the president should consider all possible candidates for the court. Well, a historic nor'easter packed a punch up and down the East Coast this weekend, leaving people in some areas to dig out of several feet of snow in frigid temperatures. CBN senior national affairs correspondent Heather Sells has our report.
The storm hit the East Coast hard this weekend, with snow falling from here in Virginia all the way up the coast to Maine. And that means digging out today. The hardest hit state, Massachusetts, which received record snow.
This was officially designated a blizzard by the National Weather Service, and we reached a total of 23.8 inches of snow. That is the second biggest January storm in Boston history.
South of Boston, one community saw 30 inches. Some coastal areas flooded, this house encased in snow. Boat marinas seen in these aerial shots froze over. And wind gusts reached 99 miles an hour in one Cape Cod community. The weather also proved deadly, with 4 storm-related deaths on Long Island, New York. 3 were older men out shoveling snow. At the height of the storm, the winds and frigid temperatures led to outages. 100,000 lost power at one point. The snow and ice also affected travel. These tractor trailers overturned on I-95 in New York. And throughout the weekend, thousands of flights were canceled in Philly, New York, and Boston. At Logan Airport, a fleet of snowplows worked to keep up with the runways.
Snow may have stopped, but the work did not. There's so much more we have to do, and we are doing just that.
Today, the digging out continues from Maryland to Maine.
I didn't go out, so, I just kind of stayed in and cooked and ate.
Thousands of travelers are now trying to reach their destinations. There's nowhere warm to go on the East Coast, however. The cold even hit Florida, dipping into the 20s and icing over orange groves. And another winter storm is brewing, expected to bring snow and ice from Denver to Chicago later this week. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Can't seem to catch a break. Thank you, Heather. Terry, back to you.
Thanks, John. Well, that was brutal for the East Coast, but it is January, so we can expect more, I'm sure. Hopefully not like that.